Well, the Americans say that about 150 truckloads worth of aid a day are going to be able to be handled by this pier. And that the first shipment that they had on Friday was about 500 tons or so of what they believe was around 500 tons. Most of that nutritional items, including food. We know a lot of nutrition bars were among those as well. But this really is a trickle in the ocean of the around 500 trucks a day that are needed. That was something that John Kirby, the National Security Council spokesperson, said at the briefing on Friday. It's also a very lengthy process. This process to get the aid into Gaza via the pier starts in Cyprus, where the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are monitoring and checking all of these shipments, which then get put onto a container ship. That container ship then goes towards the coast of Gaza and then transferred onto a smaller ship, and that smaller ship then goes to the pier, where the aid is then put onto big lorries and trucks that then drive down the pier to ports, where the aid is then processed before it can finally be distributed by the aid groups who are working. So it is a very lengthy process, and it has been a very expensive one as well. Around $320 million is what this is expected to have cost. But Rishi Sunak, the British Prime Minister, called this a Herculean effort, and indeed it has been. But like I said, a drop in the ocean compared to what is actually needed, and the US is still calling for the opening of more of the crossings, the Kerem Shalom crossing as well as the Rafah crossing as well, to try and get more aid into the Gaza Strip as well. The other thing the Americans are stressing is that there are no American boots on the ground. That's been one thing that the administration has been very firm on underlining. There are, however, American troops on the pier. So a bit of a technicality there that they are on the pier, they say, to provide a modicum of security and also to provide logistical support, but no American boots on the ground in Gaza. That's what the National Security Council is telling us.
And Fraser, this is now coming as all parties involved in negotiations, at least in terms of any kind of ceasefire, they're trying to get the warring parties back on the back at the table. The White House says that National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan will travel to Saudi Arabia on Saturday. That's for talks. That's for talks with the Crown Prince. Now, the US clearly believes that Riyadh could play a key role in a post-conflict Gaza situation. What do you think will be discussed at these talks?
Yeah, well, Jake's going to be visiting Saudi Arabia and Israel, which he will then head to on Sunday. But the US really believes that a coalition of Arab countries is going to be the future for post-conflict Gaza, especially countries like the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia as well. So Jake Sullivan trying to push forward talks because they're also trying to get some kind of mega deal with the Saudi government. Information on that mega deal has been thin on the ground, but my colleague Nadia managed to have an interview with Senator Lindsey Graham just yesterday in which he laid out what the US is hearing from the Saudis that they want. And that includes a defense agreement with the US, similar to one that the US has with Japan or Australia, which would mean that if Saudi Arabia was attacked, that the US would go to war to protect Saudi Arabia. The Saudis also wanting commercialization of uranium mining. Uranium, they have about 7% of the world's deposits in Saudi Arabia, and they're wanting the US backing to help that get off the ground, and also access to US markets as well. All of this in exchange for normalization of ties with the Israelis, and the US really believing that this normalization of ties, this expansion of the Abraham Accords, which has seen Arab nations make normal relations once again with the Israelis, could really be the backbone to a lasting peace in the Middle East and transforming the Middle East as well. So Jake will be trying to make headway on that when he's in Riyadh on Saturday, and maybe taking some of those proposals that come out of that meeting with the Saudis to the Israelis on Sunday before he discusses what else is going on with the war in Hamas. Of course, the operation in Rafah, also something that the US is watching very closely. It's understood that there will be no big expansion of that operation by the Israelis, at least until Jake has had this meeting over the weekend, and potentially even up till next week, when he hopes that a delegation of the Israelis will come here to Washington to hear the US concerns over that as well. So a lot at stake in the Middle East as Jake heads there for these meetings with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and, of course, Netanyahu on Sunday as well.